And then we get to Queensland. Nothing has changed in the state of Queensland since the disgrace of last week, including the image that we showed you on Thursday of last week, Sarah. Sarah is the lady who was not able to see her father and before his death and not able to physically be there at the funeral to be able to hug, among others, her 11-year-old sister. Now, to give you an idea of just how sick politics has become in 2020, or the madness of the pandemic has become in 2020, we are now seeing a game where media organisations try to go out of their way to tell an alternative story that somehow removes what you initially felt about people like Sarah. All of this because they want to put a black eye back on Scott Morrison after he was able to be a chorus of voices, including Labor's Chief Minister in the ACT, who said this lady should be able to go to her father's funeral. But literally tonight on Channel 2, they have other members of the family that are somehow critical of the Prime Minister for what he said. Now, we've experienced this too in the past few days after the fundraising efforts that will make sure that 4 kids will be able to see their father. We get all sorts of emails about, well, this and this and this. Families are imperfect, okay? And when you highlight the case of a specific victim, you're not saying that that person is better than every other person in their family. But for God's sake, can we not recognise that when we are talking about a 26-year-old Queenslander from Canberra that has no COVID cases and hasn't for the best part of 60 days, that in and of itself is what we are talking about. When we are talking about 4 kids who are not able to see their father, we are not talking about the dynamics of former marriages. We're not talking about things that have been posted on Facebook. We're not talking about political affiliations. And you see, this is where the crazies want to dirty the water. As I told you last week, the thing that has broken in Queensland, and let's be very clear too, it's broken in so many other states, but you have a chance to do something about this in the next few weeks, as opposed to anywhere else in the country where you can't force the hand of the government. The government forces your hand. Is that the government has got in the way of you, the Queenslander, when it comes to your kids seeing you while you are dying or your kids seeing you after you have died. That's the whole point. And the idea that people think that is up for debate, well, it exposes what so much of the media actually is about and what so much of the politics is actually about. But you remember the real Premier of Queensland, the one that you didn't vote for but still has apparently more say than the actual Premier, about whether Queenslanders can come home to the funerals of their parents, Dr Jeanette Young. Well, remember, this is what she said about why a Queenslander who lived in COVID-free Canberra wasn't allowed to come back to see her father's funeral.
Canberra is defined as a hotspot because it's within the middle of New South Wales.
Seriously? This is a doctor. The Premier came out on Friday and agreed with the Chief Medical Officer, but then her staff ran around and said that she misspoke. Well, I'm sorry, who's in charge? Oh, well, that in and of itself is the whole point, because on Friday, the crocodile tears session of the puppet Premier, she has to, of course, be controlled by someone because to make her own decisions, clearly she is not strong enough in her own decision-making process. She claims nothing to do with her. Computer says no. She talks like a bank teller who's talking to a customer about a policy they can't change versus a Premier who's, of course, in charge of the entire executive power of the state of Queensland.
Everyone's human. You know, and we're in a global pandemic at the moment. It is tough on everybody. And let me make it very clear, I don't make those decisions. I said to the Prime Minister I would refer it to the Chief Health Officer, and I did that. No, they're under. It's actually her decision. Under the Act, it's her decision.
What bullshit. The Queensland Parliament at any time could be recalled to change that Act. The Queensland Parliament was sitting last week when all of this was very public knowledge. But because the Queensland Premier thinks you're an idiot because much of the 6 p.m. news coverage that you are seeing in Brisbane covers up for her, because so many of the people who now work for the Premier used to work for the 6 p.m. news. The truth is inconvenient. So they're trying to move through it. They're trying to muddy the waters. There's right and there's wrong. As I took great lengths to talk about last week, the Queensland government is getting between you as a Queenslander being able to see your family before you die, or them to be able to see you after you have died. That's nutty. Now, no one nowhere is trying to say that there should be a system where people can freely move across the border. Of course, you should have a reason. Should you go into the 14 days quarantine? Yes, which means most likely most people will be coming from bugger all virus territory, going into quarantine for 2 weeks to guarantee they don't pass it around or catch it, to then get into the community where it doesn't exist. That's all we're talking about here. Compassion is sadly lacking because it's all about politics. And you may have noticed when she referred to herself as being human, this worked so well for Hillary Clinton, didn't it? Well, apparently this was clearly a line she wanted to get on the news, because she didn't just say it once, she said that weird thing twice.
These are difficult decisions and they're heartbreaking. I'm human just like everyone else. These issues hurt me deeply. They hurt me deeply because during this pandemic I've lost loved ones as well. So I know exactly what people are going through.
What are you talking about? You might have lost the loved ones, but were you forced by a government not to be able to attend their funeral? It's rubbish. I love this garbage where I'm single-handedly the most powerful person in the state, but I'm also a victim. It's rubbish. And after that didn't work on Friday, Stephen Miles, this is the bloke who most likely will end up taking over from Palaszczuk, should she be elected as Premier, or is at the front of the queue to become the next opposition leader, should the people of Queensland flush this government like they should. Well, he went all political on the weekend, showing you that the defence is not one of compassion. The defence is to say, stop picking on us because we've got an election coming up.
What you saw was a planned and orchestrated attack from the Prime Minister and his office, rolling out senior LNP figures. It's difficult when you have the Prime Minister, Peter Dutton, Matthias Cormann, just about every bloke in the federal government come out and attack you, and that takes a toll. Those three blokes, none of them are known for their compassion. They just pile on.
Deputy Premier, you're a hack. Premier, you're not the victim. And just despite the fact that you were able to serve this drivel up to the very compliant Queensland media, normal people in Queensland, well, they could taste that bitter pill. The penny dropped about that this could happen to their family. It's one thing to keep away those evil people who want to go on holidays and businesses, but when you actually connect the dots, the penny dropped. That this government is using borders as politics.